And we are good to go. Okay, so Michelle and I officially cannot see anybody. So if you cannot hear us, if you're having any trouble, again, we're going to try and speak into the computer the best we can, all of that. Please come off mute and interrupt us because we will not know otherwise. We won't get messages or anything to the end. We will have time at the end to have questions and also discuss. We'll be excited to kind of chat through anybody, if anyone wants to bring up a stage of change that they're in their personal life. So without further ado, let's dive in. So, like I said, tonight is the stages of change. It's a foundational concept that is extremely important. It's important to the training of health and wellness professionals, like Michelle as an LPC, and like myself as a dietitian. I am Andrew Wade. For those of you that may not know me, I am a registered dietitian. I'm the owner of Case Specific Nutrition, and this is our second mindset session together. We did one at the, I guess that was at the beginning of January, and we did it on just basically the growth mindset and some other components of that. And this is sort of a follow-up to it to continue to shed some light on ways to get yourself ahead and just better understand who you are, where you are, and what you're doing. We're going to continue to offer these throughout the year. We're excited to do them. We love doing them, and we want your feedback for topics. I will let Michelle introduce herself, and then I'm going to let her take it away because, like I said, she's probably had to teach this more years than I've been a dietitian. Does that sound fair?
It's been a part of my life for a long time. I'm Michelle Bruno. I am a counselor educator at IUP. This is my 15th year of teaching there, which is a little crazy. I teach in the Indiana campus, and we have a Pittsburgh East campus near Monroeville. And I'm also a licensed professional counselor, so I have a small private practice in Monroeville, obviously doing telehealth right now. But I like to focus on wellness counseling, positive psychology, that kind of stuff. So this topic fits very well into the work that I do, both with my students as they're growing and changing, as well as with clients that are trying to move. So in my work as a counselor, my job is more with people that are not yet in the prep stage. My job is to help get them there and then make the plan.
To get them to the fact that they're willing to make stages of change.
So what we're hoping today is that you'll have a little time at the end to connect with other people, that you can leave here with a clear understanding of what this model is for, having a goal in mind, figuring out where you are in this model. And then also we're going to provide you a couple strategies depending on what stage that you're in. So the idea about this is that it's designed to help you align your goal with your current level of readiness to make change. You guys did a great little video on New Year's resolutions, and one of the things that I would propose is that when New Year's resolutions fail, a person's readiness does not match the goal that they're trying to strive for. This model came out in the 80s around smoking cessation, and so they were wondering, why are we spending all this money to figure out who quit smoking, and we're wrong all the time? And so they took a deep dive into that, and that's where this model came from. So what we want you to do first is to take a moment, reflect. What is it that you want to think about as we move through the presentation? It's helpful if you have an example in your mind, and some of this will become more relevant, I think, for you. And so in the growth mindset talk, we talked about finding your why. Mm-hmm. And so what I would add to that is finding your why now. And think about where you are in those two items. Finding your why and answering why now.
Yeah, and I'll also note, as you're thinking of the goal, be careful and make sure that it's actually a goal and not a mission, right? So if in your head you're thinking, I want to eat better, or I want to lose weight, or I want to be athletic. Those are missions, right? And the reason they're missions is because there's a lot of subcomponents there. So what we want to be thinking about is eating better isn't just from one action. So a better example would be, I consistently struggle to plan and prepare my meals. So that is a habit, right? Meal preparation is an example of a habit. And when you have that habit, it creates an outcome of more consistent food. So when we're looking at readiness to change, yes, the mission gets affected by these changes, but it's really the action. So be thinking about the action that you've been struggling with. What's that thing that you've been wanting to do, trying to do, thinking about doing? heard you should do, whatever it is. Think about that thing, that actual action, not just the mission at hand. And we're going to run you through phases that you probably have already been through, and then the phases that you're going through, and ways that we can help, and ways that we do help, and ways that you can help yourself.
So one of the things you'll see on this model here, a bunch of arrows and little pretty colors. The idea is that we can start at any point. This is not necessarily that everybody starts at the pre-contemplation stage. So we'll get in the next slide about what each of those stages means. But this is cyclical. We can step out, and it doesn't mean we go back to get back to go. We can pick up with more progress. And so the idea is that lapsing or hitting barriers is a very typical and normal process. And this model tries to account for that. There are really 4 variables that this model looks at. One is actually the stage of change, so figuring out that part. The second is called decisional balance, and we'll give you a chance to do this a little bit later. This is the pros and cons of changing versus not changing. The third piece is your self-efficacy. You can have a really well-written goal, do your pros and cons, but if you don't have the confidence that you can pull off the meal prep or the exercise, then that's where some work needs to be done. And then the last variable are the processes. What are the ways, the strategies that we can start to change? So this model, in its kind of totality, is looking at all 4 of those items.
The trans-theoretical model. I remember that. That literally is out of a psychology book. Oop, there it goes.
There we go. All right, so as you can see, the little dude at the bottom, I think the dude, I like to call that phase the nagging stage. So none of my clients are coming in to work on any of these things. These are the things that other people nag them about. It's not on their radar. So an example would be someone who says, I have no intention of taking up running. It's not in my wheelhouse, right?
Yeah. And I will say in my world, we get clients that they're coming in for health and wellness, and there's certain aspects of health and wellness that they're considering, and then certain aspects of health and wellness that aren't on their radar, right? So, for example, something like meditation for stress relief, where it's like, that's not on my radar right now. I heard someone uses the Calm app kind of thing, and then they just kind of pass it along. And so pre-contemplation is really, there's no real connection to it at that point.
When we move into contemplation stage, this is one where there is some awareness of making the move. And so it might sound something like, I know I need to lose weight, but I hate exercise. And so the awareness of the change is there. But when we're thinking about that decisional balance where it's like, oh, my knees are going to hurt. I hate breathing hard. It's freezing outside. All those things. You can see which way I'm leaning, right? In that stage, you're really looking at weighing those things out. So you are moving, but you're not yet prepared to make a plan. When we get into the prep stage, this is what Andrew was speaking to earlier, social support is a huge piece of this stage, getting ready. So you might say something like, I know that I need help to be able to put an exercise plan into motion. I don't have the wherewithal by myself. I need to get resources. I need to get people. I need to get my squad. Those are things that we have to do there. When we get to the action stage, this is when people are moving. So this is, I started going to the gym twice a week. I'm following a meal plan. I'm doing the things, right? It's happening. Maintenance is when, usually about 6 months, they say, this has become something very routine. And so the anxiety of not exercising isn't present anymore. You know it's going to happen at some point in your day, even if it's not as maybe rigid as it was in the beginning.
You trust it.
You do. All right. And then the last one is really, I don't like the word relapse, but before we kind of terminate and end, lots of people lapse. You know, it gets to be busy in your week. Something comes up. You start to slide.
It snows for a month.
Yeah. Freezing everywhere. So we want to just be prepared and realistic that things happen and we need to be able to regroup using a growth mindset and not thinking that we're sliding all the way back down. Yeah. Or falling down the stairs as far as this one goes.
A lot of people, when they've gone through this entire stepwise fashion, are actually able to return to preparation phase. Some people go back towards contemplation if their life changed dramatically, but that preparation phase is what they often consider sort of that like return to base, so to speak, where people prepare and then go back up and then prepare and then go back up. And that's where it's funny. And when, as I alluded to earlier, dietitians are really sort of masters of preparation, right? Like that's kind of what I'm trained as someone who's more of like a wellness coach style person, right? Like my role is someone comes in and is excited to, wants to exercise, wants to eat better, wants to move, whatever it is. I'm the person that helps build the plan that fits their life. But then I'm also the person, and anybody here that's worked with myself or any of the dietitians on our team knows that inevitably when 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is down the road, you come in and you go, life threw me XYZ of a curveball. I'm off this routine, or I fell off this wagon. What's the first thing our dietitians do, right? We don't say, shame on you. I can't believe you let all that hard work go to waste. We say, life threw us curveballs. How do we change it? How do we adapt it? How do we adjust it? We immediately resume preparation mode. And if you're stuck in that contemplation phase because you're discouraged, all of a sudden hearing a plan forward might be the thing that clicks and boosts you back into, you know what, that might work, and then boosts you into that action. And so, as you kind of alluded to, your role is really like that contemplative person. And then my role is very much that preparative aspect. And that's why therapy and nutrition counseling can be really good, solid accountability measures, because they sort of serve as those like foundation steps that keep you in that action, prepare, action, prepare, action, prepare. Because whether you're looking at the seasons of the year or whether you're looking at the seasons of life, we know that very few things last more than 2 to 3 months without something changing. A schedule, an obligation, a connection, a social reality, whatever it is, life always is throwing us something. And as a result, health, wellness, and consistency doesn't come from perfection. It doesn't come from endless maintenance. It actually comes from efficient preparation. It comes from being able to jump into preparation and say, how do I adapt? Back to action. How do I adapt? And basically the healthier a person is, usually it's the faster their preparation returns to action, as a side note. So just to kind of hear how those things come full circle for us, and we'll dig into each one a little more individually.
Yeah, I think about the movement between preparation and action like muscle memory. We fall off the meal prep schedule for a little bit, and then there's that pain point of getting back in, or the day back at the gym where you hate everyone, and you're sore, and then it starts to feel good, that good sore. And so we do use the growth mindset to resume where we were before, and also maybe learn to predict some of the barriers that can come at us in a pretty consistent way. So in the stage in general, the prep stage is interesting for 2 reasons, because people get stuck in 2 different ways. One is that they skip it. They decide, I'm contemplating, I need to lose weight, and then they're like, I'm going to the gym 4 times a day for an hour. And they skip right over the preparation stage. So when that happens, we tend to see the lapsing pretty quickly. We also see people that like to land in the prep stage and stay there. So when I've gotten out of workout, sometimes I'm like, I need new gym shoes. And I need a new outfit for working out. And eventually it becomes procrastination, where it's not preparing anymore. I'm stalling. Something is keeping me from making the move. And that's where having social support, whether it's a dietitian, someone in your family or in your life, can be so helpful to help you adapt. And the preparation stage can be long. There can be a lot of different sub-steps in there for us to be able to move towards that mission.
And in the world of nutrition in particular, this is where fad diets and, Whole30s and paleo approaches and those things, that's why they're so desirable, is because they feel like they're a consolidated prep, right? You're like, this is my plan, and then you go. The problem is preparation is about troubleshooting. It's about making adjustments. And so rigid plans that weren't built for you, they end up fading and they get you knocked back out. And because they weren't built for you, they probably burnt you out. So they knock you back to contemplation, which is why everybody in this group has met or knows or has personally experienced a phase where they, like you said, go from contemplation to action using a Whole30. And after that, they're so exhausted by it, they get stuck back in contemplation, or they go back to pre-contemplation and say, absolutely screw this.
Right.
And so preparation is meant to be the workable phase, right? That's meant to be the one that we kind of can utilize to our advantage. And that's where most dietitians spend a lot of the time. The amount of times I spend in my sessions with clients that go, oh, wow, I never thought of it that way, or wow, that would really work, or oh my gosh, I think that would fit. That troubleshooting, that's what takes it and makes it your thing that fits for you, which means it's going to be empowering instead of draining. And that's going to be what makes action easier, but also action capable of getting into that maintenance phase. Because action, like from a Whole30, it doesn't get to maintenance typically. And that's just because, unfortunately, something like a Whole30 does not have sustainability. It's not built for you and it drains you. So it's kind of neat because that's our role really is building it up so that you can get to action, but more importantly, your action can sustain and maintain.
Yeah, so sometimes in the contemplation, you might have some ambivalence where it's like, I can see why this is helpful. I'm thinking about it. The preparation stage is testing the waters. And so, again, I don't want to repeat our first workshop, but having a growth mindset here means that you're going to look at this with curiosity. Let me experiment and try out this plan, this schedule this week and see what happens, rather than being very rigid and perfectionistic with that. We really need to have some grace and self-compassion and look at this like an experiment.
And so if you're somebody, so we can pause here for a second, note whatever you were thinking about, whatever the goal was that you came into this session kind of thinking about, identify where you were or where you are with that goal, right? Are you in a contemplation phase where you really are not sort of building that plan? You know it's something you should do. It's something you think you might want to do, but you don't know how yet. Are you in that preparation phase where you've been kind of like trialing some different things and you might have, if it's working out, you try to work out video, you might have, gotten some weights and you've been kind of dabbling a little, but you haven't found something that feels like it's smooth or it's in a system yet? Or is it something that you actually felt like you were in a good flow for and COVID knocked you back somewhere and derailed you mentally and hit you into an emotional place where you've been stalling again and you're back to contemplation, or you've been feeling stuck and having trouble finding your plan, so you've been stuck in this preparation, or you used your Christmas money to buy a bunch of outfits instead of actually go work out, whatever it is. So identify where you are, because what's neat is we can, as we've kind of alluded, based on where you're at, when you know that, obviously people like Michelle and I can help identify it and then help give you insights. And during our sessions, right, that's what I do is during my session, when I bring up a habit or a topic that we're discussing, I'm always evaluating based on language and insight, where's this person at? Are they contemplating this? Are they preparing it? And then my insights, right, contemplation, I'm the salesman, right? I'm making this thing sound like really cool. I'm making sure they understand what's going on. If I identify that you're in preparation, I'm giving you paths that I'm hoping click. So I'm throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall, hoping something sticks for you, looking for that aha moment of, ooh, that might work. If you're in action mode, I'm looking to challenge that action mode, right? I'm looking to support it and see if there's any holes in it. I'm looking to help make it maintenance, essentially. But you can do those for yourself as well, right? If you take a habit that you're struggling with, just like in our last sessions where we talked about taking that habit and focusing it in, boiling it down, making it smart, and then working it really gradually, you can always identify it. Okay, where am I with this habit? Am I contemplating this? Am I preparing it? Have I been trialing and erroring? Have I not been trying enough? Or have in my trials and errors I gotten discouraged? And that discouragement has gotten me stalled in this preparation phase instead of realizing, wait a second, preparation is about trial and error, right? If you don't try things and not like them, you're never going to find the thing that you do like. So you can use these yourself to kind of almost recapture your motivation to keep trying.
Yeah, and I think in the preparation stage, it's really important not to get too lofty. Like, we want to make sure we are doing things that are manageable. And so people will feel like, oh, my progress is so slow, I'm taking baby steps. But really, we are getting ready for the long haul. This is not a Whole30. We're trying to create a ritual or a habit that is now going to become part of our regular routine or day. So take a minute and think about where you are with one particular goal in mind. And in the next slide, we're going to pose some additional reflection questions for you to start thinking about some of the other factors besides the stage.
Do. I'm not going to do that the whole time. But I'm going to get this. I heard enough clicks on this really loud clock behind us, so I think we're gonna assume you guys have figured it out.
All right, so on this one, I told you that there were 4 variables in the model. The first was the stages. There are 2 in this one. This is both a decisional balance, fancy way for pros and cons, and self-efficacy. Are you feeling like you're capable to pull this off? So if you look at the box above the ruler first, again, thinking about the change that you are considering, and then from 1 to 10, using that ruler for yourself, how important is it that you make this change? So go ahead and rate yourself on that one. And then similarly, how confident are you that you can make the change? 1 to 10. And so this model is saying, like, as we think about those 2 things, where am I? How ready am I to make this move? We want to set ourselves up for success. There's no judgment in having a low score. That's data. We're going to use that data to look at the stage and then look at the strategies that we need to meet us where we are. I have a lot of clients that come in and will feel ashamed or embarrassed if we're in the preparation stage. And I'm like, shopping for the plan is part of what we're going to do to make this a permanent part for you. So again, I would reframe any judgment that you might be having. One of the other parts that's important to think about is kind of looking inside. When you think about that goal, did you notice any resistance? I don't want to go running, right? Listen to the voice inside. What is it that's in there that might be whispering or shouting something at you? That's important also. You know, just like our feelings give us information, those little nagging voices do too. And we want to just hear what it is they have to say. There may be something, some kind of protective factor that's happening for that behavior that's maintaining it. Nobody would smoke or do anything negative if there wasn't something good about it, yep. Right? And so with the smoking research, that's what they found, was that for some people, that was their social outlet. After the lunch break, they would go outside and smoke. They didn't want to give that part up, and so it wasn't a conscious thing, but something was, one of the factors that was slowing them down was the social part. So for you, is there anything in there holding you back? So what that might look like is when you do the pros and cons, it's harder to think about the change versus the not change, right? If I don't change, I'm comfortable. This is familiar. Mm-hmm. Changing is putting me out of my zone. That gives me anxiety. That doesn't feel good. So thinking about those things. What might that voice be telling you? Do you need to slow down? Do you need to have a pep talk? Do you need to make an appointment with somebody? Listening to it and not blocking it out.
A common one that I see with this is in the exercise goal. A lot of times people get really thrown because it starts off as like, I need to exercise, and then it becomes, I need to run, or I need to go to this class, or I need to do this workout, and then they don't like that workout. And so then what ends up happening, right, is now all of a sudden exercise, which could have literally been anything, becomes this one specific thing, and then that specific thing is what creates resistance. I see this all the time. So people then are starting to avoid acting because they're reluctant to go run, and then you step back and we go, well, what if instead of running you did this? And they go, oh, that sounds a lot better. And it's like, well, that still is the goal, right? And that's why I said earlier, make sure that, you know, when you're thinking about what your goal is, make sure that you're identifying the goal, not just the mission, but really like, what's the goal and how is it going to support you? Because oftentimes we get kind of stuck in those like one-track minds, you know? So that's a common one that we see within habits. And I think I actually had a client the other day that she's been trying to work on meal prep. And long story short, she works multiple jobs, and I mean, she logs 70 hours a week, and she's in a living environment right now that like the kitchen's not ideal. And so there's a lot of reasons why meal prepping is just like not something that flows well for her. And she got to the point where she goes, well, right now I do have this extra money, and I might be better off just like getting my dinners delivered, right? And so it was hilarious because we spent the month and said, okay, well, let's try a different meal delivery or meal prep service, right? And see which one you like. And so all of a sudden her goal of getting a consistent dinner went from this like sticking point of obligated to prep to this excitement of trying different food. And what was hilarious is even before she found the meal prep service that she wanted to stick with, her body weight went down because she was eating more consistently, right?
Probably less stressed out. Too.
Exactly. And spoiler alert, she picked case-specific meal prep because we have the best meals.
I think one of the other things I think about with this is to think about if you're struggling with movement on the goal, what's the outcome you're looking for? Is it more energy? Is it, feeling better in your skin? What is the thing? And what are the other ways to get that thing? Because there's more than one way. And I think we do get very rigid on this is the way. And some of those little nagging voices are not ours, right? They've come from somewhere else that we should do a certain thing.
Yeah. So there's a lot of social prompting to do that. How many people, right? Exercise. Should I do cardio or should I do weightlifting? Should I do more of one, more of the other? Should I not do one? Should I not do the other? Food. Should I eat this? Should I not eat this? Are bananas fattening? There's all this information out there that are random tips that aren't really connected to anything that's really solid. They're just random tips that have been given once here and there and have had effects on people. And as a result, they just kind of continue to live. And unfortunately, we get really, really stuck and we get that analysis paralysis because it makes it hard to make a plan if the two most popular diets of 2020, one of them was the ketogenic/carnivore diet and the other one was veganism. They're literally the exact opposite diet, and they were number one and number two in terms of popularity. And so we have this oppositional way of life that stalls us out and it makes it hard for us to prepare. That's where getting help can be useful. That's why having someone like us on the team can help you, drown out some of the random and help you start organizing for your plan.
And one of the last factor on here is really, I think, again, universal for whatever your goal is. If you're feeling iffy about being able to pull this off, how do I increase my confidence? How do I envision myself being able to pull this off when I need to? So, for me, when the semester gets like mayhem, am I still going to be able to get my workouts in? And one of the ways to do that is to pick small, manageable, smart goals so that you master that one and then you bump it up. So you're getting some momentum moving that you're, okay, yes, I'm confident now that I can do X. Now let me add a little bit more on. So we're being very intentional. All right, this is the money slide.
Oh, yeah. This is the one to everyone take pictures. No, I think we sent slides out already, right? Did we? Or if not, I think Devin will. But yeah, this is a great slide for you for reference for where you're at with your stuff.
So one of the things to think about, again, is this is a strategy to help us avoid getting too lofty in our goal setting, like the New Year's resolution trend that occurs where we think something magical is going to happen overnight and we're going to wake up, our future self is going to be fully motivated and equipped and ready to go. What we want to do is think about the stage you're in and then use the strategies. These are the processes of change that there's tons of research behind that's going to help us be able to find success. And so you want to think about interventions based on your readiness without judging the readiness. So if I'm in the contemplating part, I need to think about validation of this is a hard decision. I'm not really sure. There are pros and cons. Some motivational interviewing. What do you like about smoking? What do you not like about smoking? Let's acknowledge that both of those things exist, right? What are the barriers? What is getting in the way? What's making this hard? What am I afraid of? Those are the questions that we want to ask. And there are strategies of getting other people to help you, lots of other things that we can equip you with. And so you want to think about reframing your approach into any kind of should or have to, looking for congruence. I think I'm in the contemplation stage. Let me spend some time with the pros and cons. Let me talk to other people. I don't know about you, but when I talk to someone who I feel like we have a lot in common and they're doing the thing that I want to do, it increases my confidence of self-efficacy. Like I see somebody else who we have a lot in common, they're doing this thing. So things like boot camp, right? You can see other people make progress. It gives you motivation and hope. So sometimes the support of other people being with you in it is enough. And so you can kind of take a moment and look there to see where you are and see some of the strategies that are there to align you. You also want to think about if you do lapse, not getting into a shame cycle around that. You know, people do use the phrases like "I fell off the wagon," and then it's a free for all, right?
The amount of times I message people on a weekly basis, I literally say, "There is no wagon. Life is literally an accumulation of individual decisions, and if we decide that a series of them is a trend, That is a decision, not a fact, right? Yeah. Like it's just every week. It's so funny.
So I think I would encourage you from a mindset perspective to take a listen to your self-talk. How do you speak to yourself when you're doing well? Are you being as excited for you as you would somebody else? Are you being very critical and judging, lapses or bumps or, the things that come with life? And so really thinking about that with a new frame. Again, the growth mindset, all right, this didn't work. It was frustrating. We're not pretending it wasn't. But what can we do now? Who do I need to help me? What are the resources that I need to put into place so that wherever you are, you can move forward?
Yeah, and it's worth noting. So when people are in maintenance and then they enter a period of lapse or relapse, initially what most of the time happens is they go all the way back to pre-contemplation. They get discouraged, they ignore it, they rebel against it, they say they hate it, and then eventually they go, I do need to care about that. And then they prepare, and then they say, this is how I'm going to try and care about that, and then they act. But yo-yo dieting, as an example, that's what that is. Yo-yo dieting is the phases of going through pre-contemplation all the way through to action, maintenance, and then relapsing, and then going all the way back to pre-contemplation. And the goal is to acknowledge that it's not that there will be an absence of lapses, but it's so that the lapse no longer sends you back to pre-contemplation, but instead sends you back to preparation or even action. A lot of times you'd argue that it's kind of a blurred line between the two, but there's even an argument that you can go from a lapse back to maintenance. I talk a lot about the 300 out of 365 mindset, which is that observation that in a year, there's 365 days, and our base habits, our movement, our eating strategies, the things that we try and set ourselves up to feel our best with, if they exist 300 days a year, we are a ridiculously healthy person. And that gives you 65 lapses for various reasons. Being sick, going on vacation, having the holidays, celebrating a birthday, grieving, dealing with something hard or stressful, dealing with a deadline. There's a lot of reasons why we might temporarily pause our flow, but we have the ability to decide whether or not that was a relapse, which is a complete collapse of that flow, or a lapse, which is simply just a pause of that. And going back to the smoking cessation, right? I like to use this as a way to think about it. Say you quit smoking for 6 months, and then one Friday night you were out with some friends because, you got out of COVID and you could be with friends again, and you had 2 cigarettes that night. You are at a crossroads now, whether you realize it or not. You can either decide that those 2 cigarettes were the end of your 6 months and then proceed to smoke, or you can recognize that those 2 cigarettes were an exception to your 6 months and resume non-smoking. And if we look a year later, what we will look at is someone who smoked 2 cigarettes in a year or someone who smoked for 6 months. I think we all know that the person that smoked 2 cigarettes in a year is a non-smoker, right? And the reason they're a non-smoker is because they choose to identify as a non-smoker. That is the difference. And so a relapse is something that tends to tell us that we failed, right? Because of Alcoholics Anonymous, all the good it does. It did wonderful things in my life, in my childhood. But it's just to say that word makes us feel like we have failed. Lapse is just a pause. And the reality is when it comes to food, when it comes to movement, there are supposed to be pauses, right? The word vacation is rooted in the definition of escape from. It's meant to be a pause from what you do. And so if you eat and move consistently and then you go on vacation, you shouldn't be eating and moving the same way. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go and binge drink and binge eat and sit on a couch, but it's just to say that it's allowed to be different, and different isn't always bad. Different doesn't have to feel like failure. Difference can just be a pause. And if you develop that mindset, you can be in an action mode that's in maintenance, have a lapse, and then simply resume your maintenance. And it can get to the point where you're not climbing those stairs in the very beginning of this presentation every time you eat a cookie or have a birthday or go to your grandmother's or go on vacation or deal with a deadline. We don't need to climb the stairs every time.
And if we think about just the way we learn anything, the brain likes to simplify. In the beginning, things are dichotomous, right? It's either or. When little kids are learning stuff, that's the way it is. And then as they grow, they're like, oh, there's more than one way to do whatever. There's all these options. And I think sometimes we fall into that dichotomous, like I stayed on my diet or I didn't.
Yeah.
And really there's a continuum of things where we can recognize the reality of our lives, and again, look at it as an opportunity. Like, okay, let me look at this, see what happened, and make a new goal. Like, all right, next time that this temptation comes, I'm going to have another strategy ready to try out.
I also note that typically the lapse, how far it sends you back, it's one mindset, but it's also the amount of time. Because so for example, you have a weekend, say you're eating really consistently, moving really consistently, you have a weekend getaway with the friends, and you have a bunch of fun, you eat a bunch of stuff, and you don't move very much. That's going to be pretty easy to go, hey, I'm just going to get back home, get back into the routine, right? If you have a month where you're injured and, you're propped up leg on a chair, what we can hear there is that it threw you out of your routine long enough that you're going to have to make some plans to resume, which means it is going to put you back into a preparation phase. But that preparation phase can become action almost instantaneously with the appropriate amount of desire and excitement. And so length of time does somewhat affect whether you go back to maintenance or whether you go back to preparation. But note that all of those are the active phases. You don't have to go back to contemplating and pre-contemplating. Those can be skipped as you get stronger and more confident in what you want and what you decide you're going to do.
So in this one, this is really a newer set of research with the same, this person paired with the person who started this theory in the 80s. And this is just a really nice, quick way to remember if you want to start putting this into action, psych yourself up. Maybe that's listening to a podcast or hanging out with friends who are, have good energy, prepping. What do I need? What's my game plan? What's the strategy? The sweating, right? Putting in the work. Not many people love that part, right? At first. But we're doing the work. We know that we're sore for a good reason. And then the persevering, being determined. How do we keep going even when things trip us up a little bit? And persistence, making this a regular habit, routine, whether that's stacking it on a habit that you already have or making space for this new thing. It becomes to the point where you don't have to decide whether or not it's going to be part of your life anymore because it's integrated into your values. So one of the things I would say for this is when you're getting ready mentally, thinking about positive mindset, surround yourself with people that can talk you up and help you, not in a fake way, but in a way that is inspiring. Negative energy can really be hard when you're trying to start something new. Getting resources, and sometimes that's your squad. Who are my people that are going to get what I'm trying to do? And that's not always families, right? I remember when I first started eating healthier, I would get teased for eating sweet potatoes while other people were eating cake. And it wasn't very helpful to get teased about it. And so I think finding the right people, whether that's, with a dietitian or someone else that you're working with for support, putting in the work and celebrating the wins along the way. Don't wait until the very end where you are, have been maintaining for 2 years. You have to celebrate along the way, recognize your efforts. So more reward, less punishment is my motto. And then really you could use a tool like Rate My Day for looking at patterns. How can we learn? How can we use this to prepare better? Okay, last month I saw that Wednesdays were the trouble spot. How can I move around that or plan for that to be a day where I don't meet my goal? And so when we get to that part where it's habits, how can we help other people, right? Are there other people that see us and they're like, wow, you've made this move? And definitely I think classes like boot camp do that, where we see people really make a lot of progress with that. So we listed some resources there for you, but we definitely want to make sure that you have some time for questions or to share
feedback, engagement,
anything.
Examples, all that good stuff. So let's see. Leave that a little bit up. Okay.
And if you'd rather not come off mute and just want to post in the chat, I can read those out as well.
Yes, if you don't want to speak, you can always do that, and Devin will shout them out for you. But yeah, please. Obviously, we hope that this was kind of a helpful brainstorm. Eric, I see you off mute. I'm excited to hear what you got to say, my friend.
Yeah. Celebrating wins, and like that is celebrating small wins is like such a huge part of it, and it's not like going on the scale and like winning at dropping a half a pound or whatever. I think celebrating small wins can even be like coming up with a game plan for a difficult situation and persevering. Like me and Andrew, like I had a quick 5-minute discussion with him a couple weeks ago about the Super Bowl. It's normally a really tough day for me just because you drink a ton normally on the Super Bowl, you eat really bad food, and we came up with a game plan, and I was within my calories, didn't drink that day, and I rode that momentum. I'm still riding it, so just celebrating small wins like that is such a huge part of the process. So
well, it's cool because Eric is a member of our boot camp, our basic training out at the Plum office out here, and I bumped into him today, and it was like, hey man, I'm tearing it up this week, and it's like that fist bump, and he's with his group of people that are all getting after it, and it's a very, very positive reality. And so it's that accountability. It's being able to celebrate those small wins with self and also with people that you're invested in this journey with. And it's funny because anybody that works with our team knows that we encourage people. Like I send an email out almost every week to each of my clients and just say, hey, how's it going? What you doing? What's going on in your world? And not everyone emails me back every week, which is probably a blessing in disguise because I already get a lot of emails. But I thrive on the fact that every day I get a couple people that are struggling with something and need to vent, and I'm here to help, and I like being helpful. It makes me tick. But then I've got a couple people that go, I'm so excited about this. I hit this today, or I conquered this, or I realized this. And them being able to share that with me, knowing that I care, knowing that I'm reading it, and then me being able to reciprocate and give them that encouragement and that positive. These are the little things that can make a huge difference. And if without trying to get too deep, I think one of the things I would note is that life itself is an example of a journey that you have to enjoy while you take it, right? Because it's not something like a marathon that at the end you get to reflect on. You need to enjoy life while it's happening. You need to be present, and that's easier said than done. But it's to say, just like in life, we need to enjoy our different phases and processes. In this wellness journey, if you're truly going to be healthier, if you're truly going to work on your wellness, you need to fall in love with the aspects of that along the way. You need to be able to enjoy the view throughout it. And it's not to say you won't do hard things. It's not to say you won't do tough things. Just like in life, there's always obstacles and loopholes and, curveballs. But it's to say you've got to be present while you're here and in the now. And so celebrating those small wins allows the journey to be really worthwhile. Otherwise, you'll get lost along the way. So any questions? Any people want to give comments, feedback? We obviously would love to hear if anyone wants to share something they're dealing with, where they're at in a phase, and maybe some we can give you some tips and tricks. Again, you've got the master of contemplation and the self-proclaimed master of preparation right here, ready for you. So now's the time.
I was just going to say thank you for going over all of the steps on the ladder. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Okay, good. Because I think, especially in the beginning, like Andrew, you said, pick a goal that is something that you're working on that's attainable and not something like, I want to lose weight.
Yeah.
And so often I see that as my only goal, and that I constantly feel like a failure. And just through this talk, I picked examples of eating a dessert and not eating 12 desserts every day. Mm-hmm. And, that's something that I'm still working on, but I'm in the action phase, and I never would have realized that if I wouldn't have this presentation. I always think that I'm in the preparation phase where Andrew's just telling me what to do and I don't do it, or I do 70% of it and there's still 30% I'm not doing. So I think this was really eye-opening for me. So thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you for sharing that. No, that's extremely, I think that's a good share. And to reinforce, like you said, you and I have been working on something very specific, right? We've been working on a goal that is a part of a mission. And that goal is the thing that you're progressing in, and you've made progress in it. You went from being something that wasn't even on your mind 2 months ago to now something that you're actively having and celebrating wins with, and you're troubleshooting it and you're identifying it. And that troubleshooting is what they always say, you go prep, act, prep, act, prep, act. And then as you get action smoother and smoother, that's when it becomes maintenance. You're building the maintenance of that, and we know what effect that's going to have. And so if we really can boil it down into those one, that one key thing that's you always been an obstacle for you as an individual, getting better at that, it's that snowball that creates the avalanche. It allows a bunch of other things to be a lot easier. And that's how we achieve the mission.
And Diane, I just want to applaud your awareness of the self-talk, because you caught that. You were noticing what you were saying before and then interrupting that and like, hold on, that's not what's happening. Let me take charge of the chatter up there. And so good for you, because that's really hard, because it's our thoughts, right? We just believe everything that's running through there. Good for you.
Great share. Anybody else have anything? Oop, Devin, I see you talking but can't hear you yet. You're like the young one on this. You're supposed to be the tech savvy one. You set this up. I know. Every team meeting, I'm like, you're on mute.
No one ever accused me of being good with technology, but we have a question in the chat box.
Ooh, I like questions in chat boxes.
It is from Pittsburgh Parent, who asks, what causes a person to see they're making progress and then sabotage the progress?
Ooh.
That's a really good question.
Do you want to take the lead on it?
Sure. I think there could be many reasons. I think one of the things that happen is that the pieces that we're using to get there, when we get successful, we then let go. And we're like, oh, I got this, right? So I'll give an example for myself. Sometimes if I'm following my eating plan and my body feels tighter, I have less inflammation, I relax more and I'm like, oh, I'm good. And then I stop tracking and I stop paying attention to the things that trigger me. And in a sense, that does sabotage me, because I stopped doing what was working. I relaxed in some way or stopped using the data that I had.
Yeah. So I think that's the big one, is that urgency becomes complacency when we start to get a little bit of breathing room, right? And that's not just related to food and habits. That is the human condition, right? We are trained that way because 4,000 years ago, if we were a community on the Sahara and we were roaming the plains and we got chased by a tiger, we would run really fast while we were being chased. And as soon as it stopped chasing us, we would slow down, right? We have that tendency, that fight or flight. If we feel motivated, we get urgent, and then we kind of relax. And they always say, Devin, you have a quote that you like to say that's like, it's the hardest part is sticking with what you said when the motivation you said it with has left you. Yeah. And so it's definitely when it becomes complacency. But I think the other piece I'll note is it goes back to the conversation we had about thinking of a lapse as a relapse. So you calling it sabotage is you deciding that those actions are all related and are all correlated and are all because of one another, and you're creating that relapse, which is to say that if we started to let one of those things just be an exception, right, we'd be less fazed by it. We tend to get into this scenario where we get into a streak and then we have this exception and we let that exception be what defines us. We don't focus on the week of really quality good meals. We focus on the meal out. And because we focus on it, we feel guilt, we feel shame. And that guilt and shame leads to us to start looking fearfully. And guess what happens to the human mind? We look for patterns, right? We look for that. And so we start to look for the next bad thing. And guess what? We find one. And the next bad thing. And we find one. And the next bad thing. And we find one. Why do you think it is that most people have already decided 2021 is going to suck? The reason is because 2020, as a society, we decided that it sucked. And don't get me wrong, there was a lot of hardship. It was a rough year for a lot of reasons, but there was also a lot of really good stuff that happened in people's lives. We chose to focus on the negative and start to string them together. And as a society, we started to say, well, when's the next bad thing going to happen? And in a news channel that has, not the news media, but like in a day of news that has 90 good things and 10 bad things, guess which things we highlight? And so January 6th, when we had a pretty crazy political reality, right? Regardless of political views, it was a pretty crazy event. We all went, up, it's not over yet. And we decided to continue looking for the next bad thing and the next bad thing. And so our minds tend to look for patterns. And when you have an item that's an exception, if you choose to let that be the start of a pattern, you will look for the pattern completion. You have to work on defining that item as an exception and then actively look for the alternative to it, right? Which is to say, for example, say at lunch you decide you're going to eat a cookie and then you eat 4. More than likely, your natural inclination is going to be to pick up fast food for dinner because you're trying to create the next item in that trend. If you actively look to say, well, that wasn't ideal and I feel nauseous, no need to feel guilty because the sickness is probably the consequence enough. I'm going to eat a meal tonight that feels a lot better, and you proactively insert the next positive, you have now forced yourselves to start looking for the next positive trend. And it gets easier and easier to do that. But it's step 1, recognize that one singular event is a lapse, it's an exception. And then allow that exception to be surrounded by normative behaviors. Plant your foot with the next normative one and let yourself feel accomplished by that normative behavior, and then let that start its own pattern.
I would add on one strategy that I think is pretty universal for the sabotage thing, because I think a lot of people can relate to that, and it's mindfulness. So if I decide to eat a cookie for lunch, but I'm watching TV or reading and not really I'm like, where'd that cookie go? I only ate half of it. Where's the rest of it? If we're mindful when we're eating the cookie, first of all, we eat slower, right? And then if I do eat 4 cookies, there's some ownership in that. I'm deciding that this is delicious and awesome, and I'm going to keep going. And there's some ownership in there, not like, oh, this got away from me or I lost control. So when we're mindful, we are intentional. So just paying attention, because when those things happen, it's usually in a flurry, right? Mm-hmm. Things got frazzled and hurried, and then this decision got made. And so being mindful, like, oh, I noticed that my heart is racing and I'm really feeling, the adrenaline or whatever's happening, and just paying attention to that will also give us a little more space between us and our decisions.
Yeah, beautiful. No, I think that's perfectly said. Any other questions in the chat, or anybody that wants to get off the mic? We've got a couple minutes left, so we can do one more question, or we can get you off at 58 minutes, which is the first time I've not talked myself over ever, with the help of somebody that's a little bit more organized than me. I think we got it. Devin, any final?
No final questions, but I did see Irene said that she wanted to know if we have the recording of the growth mindset, and I don't believe we actually recorded that one.
Unfortunately, that recording failed. I was using a recording system that expired, and at the end of it, it was like, oh yeah, you didn't record this. And so unfortunately, we do not have it. So it will forever be remembered as one of the best speaker sessions ever. Even though we couldn't get the PowerPoint to work for the first 5 minutes and we started 10 minutes late, but we did not, unfortunately. But I will say that the main takeaway was read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. It is a fantastic book. It is a wonderful audiobook. It's a great listen. It's fast, and it's got each chapter is on a section of life: work, relationships, personal, family. It's really, really cool. So Mindset by Carol Dweck was kind of the takeaway of that book, that presentation. And we will be recording all of these going forward. So
I think we did have a PowerPoint though, and we could definitely share that with you. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to elaborate on anything that's confusing.
Wonderful.
And I'll also be sending out an email right as soon as this ends, and that's going to have the slides, a handout that you guys need. It's also going to have your contact information, a short little survey. And then Irene asked about case-specific meal prep. I can include some information about that as well as what was the last thing? Oh, the Growth Mindset book, which is phenomenal. I've read it myself. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, wonderful. Absolutely. Thank you, Devin. Appreciate that. And to anybody that's interested, Case-Specific Meal Prep is our company's meal prep delivery service. So we take orders Sunday through Thursday. On our website, csmpgh.com. If you go on the main Case-Specific Nutrition website, there's a tab up top that says meal prep, meal delivery. And then literally we print out the list on Thursday, order it. All the fresh meats and locally sourced produce come on Friday. We dice it up, marinate it, cook it Saturday, plate it, and then deliver it to your house contactless on Sunday. You put them in the microwave for 2 minutes. They are delicious, chef-inspired. I work with a chef who's worked in 4- and 5-star restaurants for a decade. I made the macros consistent so that all the meals have the same nutritional facts. We've been really excited about it. We came out with it almost a year ago, and it's been growing. So Devin will send more notes there, but please check it out, and we'll be excited for your feedback. The last thing we want, and like you said, short survey would be great if you could fill it out. Michelle and I want to do more of these. We have a couple other topics in mind. I think we're going to try and do one of these like every 6 weeks, basically. And so we're looking at that would put us like that very beginning of April. So let us know if that sounds like something you guys would like. And then also, please don't hesitate to email us back and let us know what topics you might want us to cover. Because even if we already have one we're going to do, I guarantee we'll end up putting them in the in the hopper, and we'll work through them together. So please give us that feedback and those notes. And thanks again for your attention. Stay warm out there, and the next time we get to do one of these, hopefully spring has sprung and we're feeling a little bit more sunshine and a little bit more hopeful about all things.
I just want to feel my feet.
I just want to feel my feet. What did we talk about? Realistic expectations, right? Awesome, everyone. Be well, have a good night, and keep up the positive. We'll look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.